What's up, everybody? It is Saturday, May 8th. I can't remember dates, and you're listening to Disassembled, the official, unofficial, official podcast of the Big Glasgow. I understand that's how it's pronounced. Comic page. Did I get that right? Did I do it right this time?
Smash that cow, just like you smash the like button on this video.
Ooh! Oh! We're done here. Pack it up. Pack it in. As always, I am your host, Ian Lynn. And as sometimes, I am joined by my charming, my talented, my complete mess of human being co-hosts, lovely Daniel.
Mess of a human being is present.
And the messiest of human beings, one Alan Todd.
Hello.
How you guys doing? How y'all hanging?
Sleepy.
Dude, me too.
I don't have my Red Bull this week.
Oh, I've been fighting off a hell of a cold since we recorded last Sunday. Which is why if my voice sounds a little scratchy, that's kind of what's going on there. So I've spent most of this week sleeping, and as a consequence of that, I've not done much else, including reading news, watching anything, reading anything, which is not to say I don't have things to say, because I can always find something to rattle off, even if I'm completely scatterbrained. It may not make a lot of sense, but I'll say the words with my mouth. I'm saying them right now. Doesn't mean anything, but there are noises happening.
Yeah, definitely committed to that.
Yeah. So this might be a little bit of a scatter shot, but we'll make it happen. The show must go on. It always does. Usually. At least it's not like that one week, like episode 4 or 5, where I just slept through the recording. 2-man show, 2 hours. All right. Yeah, I can't. I can't talk shit. Oh, last week was time management is not a strong skill of mine, let's say. It's a wonder I'm hosting a podcast. Someone should put a timer on me. We are going to change the way things work around here a little bit. Just in the interest of what makes more sense for a running order. We're actually going to start with talking about whatever big entertainment that, WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Invincible, the stuff we've talked about before. Run from that into news if there is any. Spoilers, there's not much this week.
No.
There's a few things, though. And then lastly, we'll fit the topic of the week in there somewhere, too. And then lastly, we'll give our impressions on a couple of things we've been watching or reading and kind of shut it down from there. So we're flipping this whole bitch on its head. Because change is good. I have been talking for like 5 straight minutes. Someone else please say something.
No, I'm glad we're turning upside down. I like upside down things, so why not?
How about, we're not doing news, so I can't make a clever segue about the upside down. Come back later for...
Yeah.
That's a long game segue.
Yeah, look at that. This is the long con. Now you got to stick around so you can hear what we're talking about later. I've got you.
What could
My
it possibly be?
is in your mouth. I don't like that metaphor. So this week, obviously, Falcon and Winter Soldier is over. Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Invincible is done until season 2 comes out. Eagerly looking forward to that. Yeah. However, Netflix has bestowed upon us a live-action adaptation of the work of writer Mark Millar and artist Frank Quitely, a dynamic duo, you might say. Jupiter's Legacy. I consistently keep forgetting the name, and so I call it everything from Mercury in retrograde to Pluto's toilet. I didn't watch it. I've been sick. You would think, Ian, you've been sick. You've got all the time in the world to watch TV. No, bitch, I've been sleeping. I don't really like watching things when I'm sick because like my brain's fuzzy. I don't have the mental acuity to really latch on to anything. However, you two watched some of it. Alan, did you watch the whole first season? or first? Is this? Is
First
there going to
episode.
be? Okay, first episode.
I watched the first couple.
You watched first couple, so why don't you guys share your impressions, and I will chime in with questions if any of them pop into my pretty little brain.
Do you want to start, Alan, or?
Sure. It was okay. We were talking before we started here, and as far as I was concerned, the best thing about the comic was Frank Whiteley's art, which is quite often the case.
I love Frank Whiteley's
Mark
art.
Millar joint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Mark Millar's work, not really fussed on most of the time. I quite enjoyed this one because it didn't seem as nasty as I generally find most of his stuff. But when you take away the Frank Whiteley artwork, I was just left with a TV show about some superheroes who have problems about their kids who have disappointments, which I can't relate to, and the kids have problems because they're rich and famous, and I can't really relate to that either. So there's a whole lot of stuff that I just didn't really care about, and then
Are you saying
rubbishy CGI fight.
Are you saying you weren't a big fan of Keeping Up with the Kardashians?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a guilty pleasure, but
Alan's definitely
more
a
for
Courtney
Kanye
or a
than
Chloe,
anything else.
or whatever her name is. I don't know their names.
Same. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've seen it a bunch of times.
Chloe,
But,
Courtney, Kim, Josephine,
Carrie, Samantha.
That's a crossover I want to see. Yeah.
Which is more
like
than
David Draymond in 2001. I am down with the sickness. Yeah, Kardashians in the City. Let's make that happen. Those two things I never want to watch.
That would be good for a comic podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I watched a lot of Sex in the City as well. I would watch that. So,
but in terms
Alan,
of
the
Jupiter's
third wave
legacy,
feminist over here.
in terms of Jupiter's legacy, man, I don't know. I felt like kind of the same way I felt about the comic. There's nothing. It's not bad. There's just nothing to it that's like special or unique.
Yeah.
I feel like we've seen it all before. It's fine. Like I don't really have much more to say about it. It's the first. I'll stick with it. I'll see where the TV show goes. I started reading the comic and gave up after a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Same thing might happen with this. But we did interview the lovely Paul Amos, who was actually a phenomenal guest and a really, really good guy to talk to. So I will, at the very least, stick it out to see his 2 episodes. I think he's in episodes 4 and 5, or 5 and 6. So definitely stick with it until then, and then I think after that there's only like another.
Now, is he playing one of the super people, or is he just a side?
He's a villain, I believe. He's playing Barnabas Wolf, who's a villain.
Okay.
So he did the CGI stuff, and he did the flying and the harness, and all that's going to be in the interview. So
right,
yeah, stay tuned for that. But yeah, the CGI as well. Like I wasn't impressed by. It looked super rubbery, like really false, and there wasn't any weight to it. And
dark side fight.
It reminded me of a CW show, actually.
Yeah,
and its effects. Yeah. Put me in mind of like Supergirl and the Flash, like that sort of level of quality. And I'm like, this is Netflix. I should look better. Look at Umbrella Academy, or do you know what I mean? I don't know. I thought it was disappointing in that sense. Personally.
Yeah, I mean, so from the perspective of someone who hasn't watched it yet, when I saw the trailer, and I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, or maybe I just talked about it when we were talking privately on Facebook. I feel like I'm kind of worn out on the premise of superheroes, but they have real life problems and they're like real people. That could be done well, but we have so much of that. The Boys, Invincible. I dare say Amazon Prime has that genre, that
subgenre. Yeah,
they kind of have it cornered.
I wonder if it is just I kind of always thought, like, when superhero movies got big, right, and it was cool to be a geek, and Avengers
Mhm.
were everywhere, and there's all these blockbusters coming out, and you'd have people that had never read a comic in their life going to see, like, really having conversations in the street about Rocket Raccoon. Like,
Mhm.
superheroes really kind of have blown up in the last 15 years,
Mhm.
but I've always wondered that there has to be a boiling point. Like, surely we need to get a point of oversaturation where, like, the Western in Hollywood was a big thing for a lot of years, and eventually that died. I
Oh yeah.
wonder if we're approaching that point where it's like, unless you've got something unique or special, don't bother.
Well,
I
and
don't know.
honestly, if that point I think can happen, and it may be fast approaching. And honestly, if we hit that point of oversaturation in the near future, there's been Marvel movies coming out for MCU movies at least, specifically coming out for 13 years. That's a long run
Mm,
for any kind of movie genre. I mean, sci-fi had its heyday, fantasy had its heyday. You had your 5 or 6 years of you know Harry Potter, Twilight, and then Hunger Games and its 10,000 knockoffs.
mm,
Um, yeah, I mean every kind of major genre, every kind of shift in what the consumer wants kind of comes and goes. And I think the advent of superheroes and the comic book medium becoming something that wasn't just for geeks in their messy box strewn bedrooms. Part of that just has to do with the way the world's been for the past 20 years. I mean, we've I think we've all found ourselves in a very real world that is in desperate need of escapism, and I think a lot of people wish that there were heroes that could just come down from on high and save the day. And I think that's led to a sudden acceptance of the superhero genre as opposed to the 90s when everyone's kind of like, comic books are for geeks and go play your
mhm.
video games in your mom's basement.
Yeah.
um, I certainly know that there's a little part of me, there's that kid inside that every time I read like a story of someone who has a horrible crime done to them, there's a little part of my brain that goes, kind of wish there was a Batman out there. And if it's a really bad crime and I'm having a really bad day, kind of wish there was a Punisher out there. Um,
Be careful what you wish for.
that's true. That's the dangerous thing about the Punisher as a character, and this is part of what we don't really stop to consider when we're looking at these hero fantasies. Is, I mean, let's take a character like the Punisher for example. A lot of people say, "Oh, Batman should kill. Like his no kill policy is stupid." Well, the problem with a character like the Punisher is, what if he's wrong? I mean, in the Punisher, obviously, it's a comic book. Like he's always going to kill the bad guys. They're always going to actually be bad guys
Mhm,
beyond a
mhm.
reproachable doubt. But like someone like that in real life, like you don't know. Like maybe you get it wrong.
Well, that's funnily enough, that's kind of one of the main plot points in Jupiter's Legacy is whether they should kill or not. The dad, Josh the Hamill character, he's really against it, and he's got this code that he refuses, and his son kills a supervillain, and it becomes an issue. And again, I feel like we've seen it all before. I've seen Batman, I've seen The Boys, I've seen. Do you know what I mean? This is all old ground, like treaded ground that
It's
it's been
it's
covered.
taking those well-worn tropes and throwing them together without anything new in the mix to
Yeah,
make it.
there's not a new spin,
Yeah,
and I think the novelty alone of these people flying and these fights, these CGI fights, and it is quite violent. Jupiter's Legacy, like Invincible and The Boys, it is quite violent. I think the novelty of that might have carried it over in years past, but at this point, I don't think it's enough.
yeah. I mean, again, we've already
Yeah.
had the Boys, we've had Invincible, which are both.
Especially coming right on the back of Invincible, like which does
Mhm.
it so well, and then
Well,
you've got this, which is just meh.
well, I didn't even like Invincible, so like the fact that this is just because I feel like Invincible
Yeah,
was I've seen it all before. Do you know what I mean? So this to me was just that again, and I really kind of lost excitement. I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be better. I thought there was
I
going to be something
think
to it.
when you're saying you've seen it all before, there's only so many things that can be done. If you're going to do something completely new, then it's probably going to be so off the wall that no one is going to be aware of what it is, it's going to be like you're going to take Grant Morris's brain and put it on the screen, and most folk will just go, can't handle it. So I get what you're saying, but I think saying it's all been done before, like, aye, but it's how well do you do it, and can you put
Oh no,
enough of a spin on it that people are interested?
don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, let's be honest. We've been recycling the same stories for like hundreds of years now. Like, the Lion King
Yeah,
is just Shakespeare. Do you know what I mean? There's Sons of Anarchy. Like, it's all the same. There's nothing wrong with
yeah.
that as long as you can put a new, unique take on it. Do you know what I mean? I think it needs that.
No, I
Um,
mean, I was just being me.
well, I mean, I see what you're saying. Like, that's the entire idea of that's the hero's journey, the hero with 1,000 faces, the repeating storytelling archetypes that have been have existed since Beowulf, for Christ's
Man.
sake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Invincible, I would say the first season, from what you got to see of it, yeah, it does set up a lot of, I mean, very also ran archetypes. Like, you've got your Peter Parker balancing high school and superhero life. You've got um your very obvious Justice League pastiches, but I think Invincible starts to come into its own as something that's less, like, it starts off very tropey and it becomes less so over time, especially after Omni-Man leaves Earth. Um, it still is like superhero shit is tropey. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
just how it is.
I think the I wonder if current like new superhero TV shows what they need is a unique tone, because I mean this is just me personally, right? But I loved WandaVision, and
Mhm.
that to me the tone of WandaVision hadn't really been done before, especially not by Marvel or Disney.
Mhm.
Whereas Falcon and Winter Soldier, we've seen that's just the same tone as the Winter Soldier movie or as things that we've seen before.
Yeah.
Um, then you had Invincible, which I feel like my main issue with Invincible was that I think it had a tonal problem. It was like obviously Invincible's like super cartoony, right? Bright colours and it's like proper comic book, and then you've got this extreme violence and that kind of contrast. That's like its whole shtick,
Mhm.
and then. But then, to me, that if that's what you're going to do, the violence should be fun. But the violence in Invincible isn't fun; it's horrible. Like the things that he does to prove a point and the cities he wrecks and the bodies that you see everywhere, and like there's nothing fun about that, and I think that clashes with the novelty of a violent cartoon. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I think if you're going to do like Rick and Morty has violent scenes that are funny. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's fine, but when you do something with this like serious dark tone, personally I feel like it would have worked better in live action. That's my main issue with Invincible, I think.
See, that's the
Um,
thing with me with Invincible is, unlike, let's say, I feel like the exact opposite end of that spectrum is The Boys, where the over the top violence it's so over the top and cartoony that you're like, that whole room
yeah,
full of people, their heads exploded. That's hilarious. I feel like Invincible
Yeah.
is going for the opposite. Like, they're not trying to make the violence fun. You're supposed to feel the horror of, like,
which
oh
I think
shit, dude.
but I think that would be fine if it was a live action show in the style of The Boys. But
Mhm.
because it's this garish cartoon and the blood's bright red and the suits are bright green, it doesn't carry that tone well. The visuals don't match the tone. I don't think. I don't think it's dark. It doesn't look dark enough for how dark the tone is. Like I feel like there's a clash there that just doesn't gel well for me.
And I can understand that. For me, it highlights the horrible parts of the violence and the after effects of what a superhero fight would actually
Mm-hmm.
entail that you don't
But
normally
Yeah, it
see.
does it
I
far
get
better
that.
than Zack Snyder's stuff does, because that's just relentlessly grim and 13-year
Yes.
old boy going, "Oh, this is so adult." Whereas Invincible is fun and it's bright, and then you have this horrific violence, which I think the contrast there is perfect. Like, I think that is what makes it so good, because that was what was good about the book. The book didn't look like an image book from the early 90s, which was super grim and gritty and violent and whatnot. It looked like something that could have come out in 1962 or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it had this awful, awful side to it, which made it a step above, or a cut above, sorry, like the other stuff that was on the stand. So I'm the kind of exact opposite of you. Like, I think that's the perfect way to do it. And as I think
Me-
you've said before, Ian, like, it doesn't or it won't work live action from where it goes, like from here. Like the scope of it, the sheer scale will not translate into live action. Like, there's not a budget out there that will do it justice. So cartoon was definitely the way to go.
Maybe it's
I think.
just me, but I don't. I think regardless, I don't think it's the writing or the voice acting. I'm not getting against that, but I think even regardless of the quality of that, how good that is, you're never going to. I'm clearly the outlier here, right? But you're never going to get that level of gravity, like of the situation, across to me in an animated form. Like you show me cartoon blood, I'm not going to go, "Oh, that's horrific!" Like it's cartoon blood. Like I don't
I
know,
feel like,
I just I can't feel it.
oh,
I
yeah,
don't feel anything.
and I mean, you're a patent sociopath, so that's fine. Um, no, your viewpoint on it is like that's totally valid. I get it. I have
I
a.
do wonder if I have just been desensitized after years of
It could be
watching
because
like
I think we had this
violent things.
discussion
Kind
on
of
the
sounds like it.
chat,
Yeah.
and I think to a certain extent, it almost seems like I have maybe an easier time suspending my disbelief. I
Mhm.
am so tired of my screen turning green. I don't know what to do about that.
The
For
green
those
man
listening in
always saw it.
audio, my webcam just keeps
He's the
turning
green
fully
boy.
green.
The
So
good thing is though, Dan can have some real fun with this, like when it comes to putting
that's
the video
true.
out. So
You could do
I'm looking forward to seeing what
some
he
real
does.
chroma key stuff to that. I needed an excuse to buy a new webcam, so this is great. But yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I think it does maybe require a certain amount of being able to kind of turn your brain off to a
Mm.
certain extent.
It's
But
never a problem. Like,
I think that's fine when you're not asking people to actually think about it and feel the gravity of something. Like if it is just switch your brain off and watch the blood and guts, fine. But it's not. They're like, oh, look how serious this is, and look at the after effects and the psychological damage and blah blah blah. But let's do it in a bright cartoon. That doesn't work for me. Like I need one or the other. Do you know what I mean? It needs to either be like Happy Tree Friends or Rick and Morty, or it has to be like The Boys. Like, do you know what I mean? Like super, like dark bloods, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me.
Well, I would be interested to see what you feel about the directions it goes in later down the road. And the tone of the show may never be your bag. I mean, regardless of where the story goes, and that's
Hmm.
fine. I guess maybe I'd be interested to see what your opinion on the comic would be. Um,
I lost interest, to be honest. I was reading it, and again, I just kind of thought, "Is this it?" It's just his dad's a bad Superman, and he's trying to like show his son that humans are irrelevant, and
so that's the
then
thing is
there's
that's
aliens. I'm
not
like,
it.
nah.
That's where it gets more interesting later down the line. The story of it is not just his dad is bad Superman and he's the big bad of the whole series. Um,
I have been
his
meaning to go
dad,
back to the comic for a while, so I might do
his
that.
without giving too much away, his dad actually has a pretty major redemptive arc over the story.
Right.
Like I don't want to go too deep into spoilers. Alan, you didn't read all the way through, did you?
I've not
You said
finished
you
it
got
yet.
like
No.
halfway through.
Yeah, I'm like halfway, something like that.
How much do you care about what ultimately happens to Nolan without saying anything about how he gets there?
I mean, I'm pretty invested. Like,
Okay.
I'm
Okay. I'll leave it alone then. But Nolan has
yeah,
an
don't
arc
spoil it.
over that series. That's pretty meaningful.
I've seen one of the
So,
covers for one of the last issues, so I kind of knew there was more to come. Like, I'm not going to be
yeah,
completely
they
surprised
they
there.
they
But
go places. Like it definitely breaks away from like, oh, this is just like we've had so many bad Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know,
Irredeemable's a good
Mark
one.
Waid
I
done a
like
really
that.
good one. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah,
one.
Irredeemable. I like Irredeemable.
yeah. That's a good pick.
But like we've had Injustice, we've had Zack Snyder's movies, we've had every
Rebirth.
like literal
Yeah.
dictator Superman, premises under the sun. So it's very easy to look at Omni Man and be like, oh, it's just more of that. But it goes places. Like it breaks away from the superhero tropes. I think what I've been saying the few times I've talked about it is there is a definite point in the series where it breaks from superhero show to sci-fi drama, like almost kind of Star Warsian, like galaxy spanning sci-fi epic. So it definitely it has a tonal shift at a point that I liked a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Jupiter's Legacy, meh,
Nah.
meh.
Yes.
I'll stick with it.
It's so uninteresting that we talked about Invincible for most of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we spent most of this past 25 minutes talking about everything but Jupiter's Legacy.
That tells you all you have to know.
Watch
Pretty
it if
much.
you've had a few and you need some superhero shenanigans, I guess. Or rewatch all the Marvel
Watch
movies
Invincible again.
in chronological order. Be like Bethany and Massimo.
But
Who
add in Shield.
could not be with us this week because they had work engagements. I hope they are doing well at those work engagements. And I really want to know how their chronological MCU viewing is going. So maybe next week I'll be joined by them. I don't know. We'll see. Not promising anything. I don't know why I'm saying everything in this tone. I'm one accent away from talking like I'm from New Zealand. So we were going to talk about best animated adaptions, and then speaking of Massimo and Bethany, their work commitments came up, and that's not really the wheelhouse of Alan and Daniel here. Though I feel like we did get, I feel like I kind of got your feeling on some animated stuff right there in that discussion. So instead,
he's a big old misery guts.
Yeah. So instead of a topic of discussion that kind of came up over discussion, enunciate your words, Ian. A topic of discussion that's come up over the past week is the idea of separating the art from the artist.
Good sultry podcast voice. I enjoyed that.
I'm just going to go full NPR. And this is all things
John
considered.
Anik over here.
Yes, except John Anik, I think, has a higher pitch voice than me. And also, I refuse to shave my head bald.
I was going to say he's bald too.
Yes, he is. You know, that seems to be the necessary qualifications for being a UFC commentator. I'm waiting for Michael Bisping to shave his head. I'm waiting for it.
And yeah.
He's been bald before. Him and what's his face? Not Justin Gaethje.
Cruz?
This no. Yes, I want a bald Dominic Cruz would be. Boy, that sure would be something. This is so far away from.
I think we've lost a lot of our audience. Yeah.
Sweet. Anyway,
you lost me.
so look.
It's time.
I want to see Bruce Buffer shave his head. I want to see everyone shave their heads.
Fuck yeah.
So the comic book creative sphere has become a bit of a weird spot the past few years. Obviously, the Me Too movement has kind of swept the internet for mostly good reasons over the past several years. And that's led to a lot of creative visions in the comic book world, some of which were very highly regarded previously, kind of getting knocked off their pedestal because of skeezy behavior behind the scenes.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, the comic book, the realm of comic book creation in the business has been kind of a boys' club since it started in, I mean, really was the superhero genre in the 30s. And, it's like anything like that, it's been difficult for female voices to kind of break through that locker room, door. And luckily, we are getting that now more and more. Obviously, you've got people like Gail Simone. We're getting some good female voices in there, but not without some amount of harassment and bad experiences by the hands of male creators. You've got names like Ethan Van Sciver, who his big thing, I don't think he was accused of doing anything untoward sexually,
Just being
but
an
he
awful
has,
human being.
yeah, he's got some real questionable, like super right wing, like not to get too political on here, but some real questionable super right wing views. Um,
And
geez,
his
who
art's
who
rubbish.
else? Who else has been kind of
Uh, One of my favourite writers is Warren Ellis, and
mm,
yeah, that was a letdown when I heard
yeah,
about
that's kind of a difficult one.
that. Yep.
I mean,
Joss
luckily we
Whedon.
haven't. I mean, there are some really good creators where, like, who else is shocked we haven't heard anything terrible about Frank Miller?
Right.
Apparently, despite writing every female character as a whore in his books, upstanding guy. Um, Garth Ennis, nothing about him. Neil Gaiman is as pure a human being as you will ever meet. Um, Jim Lee, good guy. Nothing about him's come out.
Grant
Um,
Morrison.
Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison is such a
Just a ballad.
humanist. I could not see Grant Morrison ever doing anything like Grant Morrison's a strange human being, but I could never see them doing anything untoward.
Hmm.
But that leads to the kind of difficult Matt Landis. That's another one. That's a really big one. That's a
Oh,
really big one. That's maybe
never
the
liked that guy.
worst.
Never liked that guy, man.
What was that one?
Which is he did American Alien.
Yep. Yep. American Alien. And I
Was
think
that
he
the
did a
Superman
Superman.
story?
Yeah, that was a Superman one. Yep.
Yeah.
Max Landis. Sorry, I totally missed
Yeah,
the
yeah.
name you said.
Yes,
Yep.
Max Landis. And that leads to the difficult decision of some of these really, I mean, presumably terrible individuals have written some really good stories. They are maybe bad people with a great creative voice. And that leads to kind of the difficult moral decision of what do you do with their body of work? Do you never touch it again? Are you still willing to go back for a reread if you already own the books? If you've already purchased them long ago, do you donate them? Do you burn them? I am not a fan of book burning, no matter the author, unless maybe it's Hitler. Um, does it matter the weight and severity of what the person is accused of? For example, if someone's just a jerk, like they're just an asshole to people, but they didn't touch anyone inappropriately, they didn't make any super forward comments, they're just kind of a surly dick. Such is the kind of territory of the art. A lot of artists are dicks. I'm probably still going to read their stuff. Versus, let's say, I'm only going to bring this up once and very briefly because it's a very dark story. But let's say Ian Watkins, the former vocalist of Lost Prophets, did some unforgivable, inhumane shit. I will never listen to their music ever again. The people that did the instruments in that band, they're great. They started a new band. I will listen to their stuff all day long. But the old band, I can't touch it. It's too tainted. Where do you guys fall as far as that kind of separation goes? I mean, how important is it to consider what the artist has done, what the art itself is, how much you connected to it personally before whatever happened? How do you handle that?
I think it
Not
depends
as well.
on the person. I sorry, it depends on the person, B, the work, and C, what they did. Like Joss Whedon, I think is clearly just an awful person, and I won't contribute to his fame or fortune by purchasing anything that he's involved with. I own like a bunch of comic books, but I'm selling my entire collection so it doesn't really matter. Like, they're all gone. Uh, Pantera, what's his name? Phil Anselmo. I won't listen to Pantera again. Like, did shouting white power at gigs and stuff. It's like, nah. Like,
Yeah.
great band, but I will never. I don't even listen to the CDs that I've got anymore because I think, fuck that guy. Looking back on it, it shouldn't be that really
Surprising.
hard to have seen it coming because Dimebag Darrell has like a guitar with the Confederate flag on it and stuff like that. So, that's not cool. It's never been cool. So, Warren Ellis, I won't buy his stuff. I have a bunch of stuff that he wrote. I enjoyed it at the time. But again, I won't put money in the guy's pocket. I won't make him more famous. If we're going to go back, H.P. Lovecraft, I bought the collected book, like everything that he's written, or most of the things that he's written, before I knew that he was a complete piece of shit. And I'm kind of like, well, I won't buy anything else which would put money into the guy's estate or whatever.
That's
So I don't contribute monetarily to any of these people, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to read their stuff regardless, because you're enabling a person, as far as I'm concerned, at that point.
so that actually, you bring up an interesting perspective with H.P. Lovecraft, because there's also the thought of, for some people, it's just, okay, well, this is a product of the time that they lived in. Like, it doesn't
There is that,
excuse
but
it.
with H.P. Lovecraft specifically, like, even contemporaries thought he was over the line. Like, that's pretty much well documented. Like, so
And
he
then
was
there's something of a
just an
question of
awful
like
person.
the historical significance of certain literature and things like that. So that also, like, I guess I could say I agree with you, but I could see someone being like, well, I want to know the significance of these stories and the influence they've had, and so I'm going to read them. But
Oh
there are
yeah,
ways
the
to
thing.
read H.P. Lovecraft without giving money to his estate.
Well,
Hundred
that's the other
percent.
thing.
Yeah, we live in the age of the internet now, so go and download that shit for free. Fuck that guy. Pardon my French, but just basically saying about how, like, historically important works. Why
Yeah,
are they historically important though? Because they were old white guys, or not, maybe not so old. They were white dudes who were living at a time where that was basically all that you were getting. Do you know what I mean? Like, certainly in the Western world, all you were getting was the white voices, pretty much. There's a few outliers and mostly male. If you look at abstract art, there was a documentary came out last year, the year before, basically saying that there was a woman, and I cannot remember her name because I'm awful with names, but it's a great documentary, and it was
same.
saying how she was actually the very first, like, abstract painter, and
Hmm.
this now completely changes, like, the history of that particular style of art, because it was always thought that it was whoever. Like, I don't even know because I'm not an art historian either, but
Right.
because she was a woman at the time, like, she wasn't pushed forward, she wasn't given the spotlight, and so therefore didn't become, like, historically important until something was rediscovered more recently. So the
Right.
reason H.P. Lovecraft and J.R.R. Tolkien and all these guys are at the top of the tree, kind of thing, is because they came from a time and a place where that's what was being pushed. Like, the Bronte sisters and whatnot are outliers in that regard. Frankenstein, what's her name?
Mary
Murray
Shelley.
Shelley.
Mary Shelley. Mary
Mhm.
Shelley. I mean, you've got Mary Shelley, and then you've got Bram Stoker. You've got Jekyll and Hyde guy. Like, terrible
Right.
names. That's terrible, isn't it? But, like, all these other guys who are, like, super super famous, and then there's like a handful of women who are pushed forward. Very little, people of color or whatever, and amongst this, because they weren't being pushed, and that is why these awful people are still to this day at the head of the pack, because they're the ones who are you know, have the advantage of being a dude, white, straight, you know, all these other things like cis. Like it's just more these days. People are trying to have a bit more inclusivity.
Mhm.
The woke snowflake SJW agenda. Whoa. But it can only be a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Like that more people are given time and space to shine,
Right.
and so why bother with people who are scum? Like,
Right.
there's somebody else out there can write something as good, if not better, if they're given the opportunity to shine, and therefore take less away from them by not reading the stuff that's problematic. That's
Well,
my take on it. It varies
it,
from person to person. Do you know what I mean? Like it depends on what they've done, what they've said, other things. The guy from Lost Prophets, I didn't like Lost Prophets, but if I did, I would never ever listen to them.
yeah,
That would be disgusting.
definitely not. Well, and I think how you handle, obviously, yeah, some stuff is worse than others. I think how you handle historical literature kind of depends on what your what angle you're coming at it from, because you're totally right. Um, if, for example, you are, let's say, a English literature student in university, you're probably gonna have to read that shit for the historical purposes, for
Yeah,
analysis, to understand the influence on later works, etc. If you're just reading for funsies, you really don't have to. Like a lot of historical stuff, you can let that pass by. I've read maybe one H.P. Lovecraft story ever before I knew he was a kind of piece of shit. Um, there are plenty of, because of those influences, there are plenty of also rans in the modern day
Yep.
that have taken those templates and done them better. Um, you've got things like, I mean, kind of maybe a weird case, a different case is J.K. Rowling, um,
Yep.
yeah.
who would probably have been fine if she just never had a Twitter account.
Should have
Yep.
been a closet scumbag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
the first Harry Potter book is the first full novel I ever read as a child. That's the one that made me crack open the book. It's always
But
going
I mean,
to, like, regardless of the kind of current situation of the author, like to a certain extent, that's always going to have some significance for me personally. So that is, I mean, maybe that's a really kind of a deeper case of separating the art from the artist. And if you're able to do that, because some of the stuff, it's like fucking H.P. Lovecraft. I have no personal significance with that. I didn't grow up reading H.P. Lovecraft. That's something that
yeah.
high school kids read because they want to seem cool.
Mm.
Ooh, I like Cthulhu. Ooh, you can go play a
Go,
Clive Barker game. You'll get what you're looking for.
go read Fatal. That's a
Uh,
much better version of it.
exactly. Whereas stuff like that, it's something I grew up reading. It didn't have those negative connotations at the time. Now it does, and it's like, well, do I just ignore that series for the rest of forever and strike that part of my childhood out, or do I just never buy anything related to that franchise ever again, but still allow myself to enjoy what I enjoyed about it as a child? And that's a rough decision to make,
Yeah.
because I don't agree with a single
For
goddamn thing that she said.
no, it's awful. But for me, I never really cared too much about Harry Potter. But it's
Well,
got
you're too
how
goddamn
many
old.
folk reading books? Like,
Nah, near did that.
yeah, I mean that's it. Like, I'm just an old guy. Like, no question. I had a girlfriend who loved Harry Potter, and when I think it was like the sixth book
Yeah.
came out, like we read it together, kind of thing. So it was just like, yeah, okay, that was one of those things. But you're saying there, like, if she didn't have the Twitter account, there's a lot of stuff in there which has been highlighted since. Like, folk who have been saying like, oh, from the time that I first read it, I was like, this is not on. The goblins in the bank,
Yeah.
what do you call him? The
In
werewolf
hindsight.
guy, like, yeah, it's all a lot of stuff that should have been flagged up probably before now. but more people are aware of these problems now. More people are sensitive to it and not afraid of being the one to say this is bullshit. Like this shouldn't be happening. Which things should be held more to account. You can enjoy something and disagree with it. Like
Yeah.
100% you can do that, and I'm pretty sure Dan is going to say something towards that point. Like because we differ slightly on this, but
Yeah.
or maybe a lot. But I think people should be held to a standard. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't come out and say things and just be like, "Ah, well, it's fine. It's just this. It's just that," because it
Right.
perpetuates the problems in the world, and that's the kind of place that I'm coming from with it.
Like you
I'm
got to kind
trying to
of
just be a little bit better, but
you got to come at
it's
it from kind of a critical eye.
yeah.
The goblins
I
at
mean,
the bank thing is
I've been a
something
scumbag myself, so
we all have. Anyone who pretends they've never been a
yeah.
scumbag has been definitely the most of a scumbag of anyone. They've got something to hide. The goblins in the bank thing is interesting to me because I can see the problems with the racial connotations of treating the goblins as a stand-in for the Jewish people. At the same time, it is kind of fantasy archetype, and maybe that's from the same racial issue, but it is kind of fantasy archetype, fantasy trope that goblins guard treasure.
I mean, all I've kind of got to say about that is look at the Star Wars prequels. George Lucas has never been outed as saying anything particularly bad, but there's some very, very dated racist stereotypes in those films. Do you know what I mean? So
yes, the bad guys were Japanese, man.
Clearly, yeah,
dude, straight up,
yeah, that's not aged well.
The Gungans with their like horrible broken English.
Oh, sorry, Annie.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that George Lucas has never had to kind of reckon with that ever.
No, it's just
I think it's just because everyone thought they were trash.
That's fair. They were shit to begin with, and you didn't really.
Yeah.
Was there anything that like that with that kind of issue in the original trilogy? Because I don't think there was really. That I can remember.
As far as I can remember, no.
The most controversial thing is a dude kisses his sister, but they didn't know they were related at the time, so like it's all cool.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that it's Carrie Fisher, she's pretty, man.
I had a joke, and I'm not gonna say it.
Yeah, I should have said that one. So,
Daniel, I feel like Alan and I have just been prattling away here.
No, I was enjoying just listening there.
I want to hear your thoughts.
I look at it from the perspective of, I mean, you've read about all the terrible, horrible stuff that Kevin Spacey did and is still allegedly doing to this day. And then you watch Seven and you go, oh my God, he's amazing. Like, you can still appreciate that. It does niggle in the back of your head, don't get me wrong. It does take away a wee bit, but I wouldn't say it ruins the enjoyment entirely. Obviously, I think there's a limit to that. I think if the Lost Prophets thing is past that line where it's like, no, that is irredeemable. That is like, there's no coming back from that. Whereas the other things, and it's like, yeah, you've heard that it was a bit horrible and all the rest of it, and you go, aye, but I can still go back to a time that I knew before, like you're saying with J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. You read those books not knowing any better, so you can go back to that time and still appreciate it for what it is. Knowing what you know now, going forward, obviously, I don't think Warren Ellis should still be able to work at the caliber that he was working at before. Nor should Kevin Spacey. Nor should these people. Once have Me Too is a good thing because it's weeded so many of these folk out. Joss Whedon, there's another one. Like those people's careers,
which kills me because I loved Firefly.
These people's careers should take a hit. Like they shouldn't. They have a reputation to uphold and. They do owe something to the fans that grew up with our stuff, I think. Firefly fans, Harry Potter fans. And I think there's this attitude with James Gunn that happened right on Twitter. And there was this whole kind of attitude and I think it's because people like the Guardians films. That was 10 years ago, it's fine. He's grown as a person since then. That angle gets taken a lot. And I'm like, well, sure, but the fact that James Gunn is back working with Marvel and doing a big DC film, and he tweeted some really horrific shit. Like, I don't know, man. That doesn't sit right with me.
So that's the thing, is I haven't actually seen any like really, obviously James Gunn made some very questionable jokes.
Oh
Um,
yeah, past even in, was it 2007, 2008? Even back then, absolutely inappropriate. Like just
but
nothing funny about it.
but I
Just
mean, then it really does become a question of, do we, if it's just something that they said and they've grown as a person since then, this is not like they actually did something to someone.
uh-huh.
Do we hang people by the noose forever of something they said on Twitter 10 years ago?
On the other hand, I do believe in freedom of speech. I do think that the idea of censoring stand-up comedians and things like that, I don't agree with that.
Mhm.
I think that's a bit of an overstep,
Mhm.
personally,
Well,
because that's
yeah,
taken away from their art and their creativity. Like
I think if
putting
they say
limits on
something
them.
shitty, counter it by saying something like present a better idea.
Um,
Um,
I've always said that you can. I think you can joke about anything, but then you read stuff. For me, right, when it comes to comedy, for me, the way I always look at it, see if the laugh outweighs the shock, it's fine. But see if a joke is more shocking than it is funny, you shouldn't have told it.
I
That's my kind of caliber for looking at it. That's the bar I kind of set. In terms of like, you know,
yeah,
edgy jokes.
I mean,
That's kind of how I feel about
the way I look at comedy is, are when someone makes a joke that might be off color, because I love I love kind of racy comedy. I do. Are they laughing with you or are they laughing at you? Is the joke meant to be mean spirited?
that. Well,
Are they making a
that's
joke at your expense, or
Punch
is it
up,
just,
don't punch down.
yeah, exactly.
that's the other thing as well. It's very easy to sit here as a white straight male and go, they're not that offensive. Do you know what I mean? But that's because I don't. Do you know what I mean? They're not offensive to my culture, so I don't care. Like
We were
that's a
talking just
disconnect as
before you
well.
come on earlier about Dave Chappelle, and I was
Mhm.
saying
Yeah,
I loved Dave Chappelle, but
is it?
once he came back and he's kind of making jokes about transgender and stuff like that, it's like, dude, like, it's not cool. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a people that are being kind of like just having a bad time in general from the world. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, take the piss out of people who are destroying the planet, who are rich and awful human beings. Take the piss out of rapists, murderers, the capitalist scumbags that are, destroying the planet. Why are you like piling onto somebody who's already at the bottom of the heap? Like, that is some bullshit. Like, and I can't forgive that. Like, I think that is just, if he comes out and says, man, like, I was out of order, I shouldn't have done that, but instead he played the, well, it's freedom of speech type thing. I'm a comedian. I should be able to say what I want. Yeah, you can say what you want, but people also have the right to call you out on it, and
There.
It's
that's like
it's a
that's
freedom
where
of
it comes
speech,
down
not
to.
That's the
Like,
freedom
other
from
side of it.
consequence.
Yeah, totally agreed.
It turns out we did have things to say about this.
The other thing
do
is,
you?
I've always said, if you want change on a larger scale, you can go on podcasts and you can talk rubbish and you can write essays and publish them. If you want something to change, vote with your wallet. Hit
Mhm.
them where it hurts. Don't support something if you don't agree with it. I've
Yeah,
always said that about my main thing is like with game developers, like with what Konami did to Kojima. I will never buy another Konami game again. But when you specifically look at things like video games, there's a way around it. Instead of buying the game new, if you buy that game used, the game shop gets your money and the publisher gets nothing.
right.
So, like we were saying earlier about Lovecraft and being able to sort of consume that in a different way, I'm not condoning piracy, but there's always that option as well. If you don't want to
Right.
pay for a film, I know an
I'm
argument could be
condoning
made that.
piracy.
Do you know what I'm
Arr.
saying though? Like there's other ways to consume things that
Yeah.
isn't supporting the creator that you don't like, and
Well,
I think it's up to the individual. It's up to you to decide who you want to support and who you don't. But
definitely. I mean,
yeah,
it's personal liberty. That's maybe the one other thing I would touch on before we move on here. Is you mentioned Kevin Spacey and like watching Seven, right?
hmm
I think it's a more complicated situation then, because it's one thing if there's like, okay, here's book X written by author Y. Author Y said a bad thing. Now I'm going to cut book X out of my life. But with a movie or a video game or any sort of massive creative effort, yes, there's this one
There's hundreds of people
individual.
involved.
Yeah.
right, there's this one individual that's problematic, but then there's so many other people that lent their hand into that big, that big effort. Now, I think with Seven, it's kind of like, maybe it depends how much that individual is at the center of it all. In Seven, obviously, really the highlight of that movie is kind of Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. Um,
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey is the villain, which again also maybe makes it a little bit more watchable, as he plays a psychopath in that film. Versus something like, again, The Lost Prophets, like that was their front man, that was their face, that was their voice. The other guys
But
moved on and made a new band, like they're doing fine, so I don't feel bad like totally cutting that out.
yeah, my counter argument to that though would be that should add to the responsibility of creators. Like you take when the James Gunn scandal was happening, right? Everybody. The point that a lot of people were making online on Twitter was this isn't just James Gunn. This is going to affect the cast, the crew. So many jobs will be lost if the Guardians films get cancelled. Blah blah blah. That is on your shoulders as a franchise creator. If you're a Joss Whedon or a James Gunn and you've got these people come to see your film, you've got a fan base, you've got a cast, you need to watch what you're doing. Like there's this argument that, well, why should I have to watch myself? I can say what I want, freedom of speech. But when you've got that much responsibility on your shoulders, no, you do need to condone yourself properly. It's your job at the end of the day. I couldn't walk into my job and throw out comments like that and not expect to be, reprimanded for it. So why should they? That's the thing as well.
I'd go even further than that. I'd say, as a human being, like, you should be, doing that anyway. Like, if you are that piece of shit who does these things, then everything that's coming to you is deserved.
But not everyone has that morality though. I think some people, their morals are right, but some people aren't, and they need a consequence, to deter them from doing it. I think.
Yeah. Just
just don't be a knob.
Be a decent human being, I think is what it like. It turns out a lot of things in life come down to be a good human. I know that's like a crazy concept that some people have a really hard time like wrapping their little minds around, but don't be a dick.
Does this person want to be touched? Does this person, want to be screamed at and abused? No. Maybe don't do it then. Like, and if you see someone else doing it, like, don't go, maybe I should say something here. Just fucking say it. Like, if you are like Ben Affleck, I think someone asked me before, like, what was my problem with Ben Affleck? It was Ian, not you, Ian, other Ian. And it was more to do with when Rose McGowan came out about Harvey Weinstein, and basically Ben Affleck was like talking to Rose McGowan. I'm sure it was Rose McGowan, and Rose McGowan or Rose Byrne. I always get their names mixed up.
I think it was Rose McGowan.
Doesn't matter.
She wrote the essay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's her. Yeah, Rose McGowan. So basically, Ben Affleck was like, "Oh God damn it, Harvey! We've talked about this, like, like having a moment of like frustration and whatnot." And she was just like, "Oh fuck you! Like, you knew this was happening. Like, everybody knew this was happening, and you're all quite happy to just sit there and drink from the trough or eat from the trough." Sorry, that's the problem. Like, everybody is too invested in this whole bullshit system, like, to actually make a difference. And that's what you're saying there about voting with your dollars, because that is about the only power you have within the law. It's almost useless because it's like, will you contribute to this horrible corporation which is destroying the planet, or will you contribute to this horrible
none of them are golden, but you can still.
None of them are good in any way whatsoever. Like,
but you can still.
You can make a slight difference. The real difference is get out there on the street and fuck shit up.
I don't think that changes things. I don't think in the grand scheme of things. I think
only changes that have ever happened come through that.
I think these people that are at the top, these multimillionaires and CEOs, I think the only thing they see and care about at the end of the day is numbers, is money. And I think if you really want to hit them where it hurts, that's where you do it, personally.
Yeah.
Strike.
I think I'm to tie this kind of rabbit hole it back to comic books is, because
Oh, that's right.
I can do that. I can make it happen. There's a famous saying that all that is required for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And that's, I think, if there's anything we should take away from comic books, if there's anything we should take away from the figures of, your Batmans and your Supermans and your Wonder Womans and your Spider-Mans and your Captain Americas, it's to do, I don't want to say do the right thing because it sounds so after school specially, but do the best you can. Like, if you know something is wrong, don't do it. If you see something wrong, say something about it. Like, those are the values that we should be inspired to uphold by figures like Clark Kent. Like, that's what he stands for. Truth and justice. I'm not going to say the American way. I think they gave up on that part of the whole spiel a long time ago. But those first two things, those are good.
Yep.
Which is why the Ethan Van Skyvers of the world don't make any sense to me. It's like, how do you love comics and then go on about woke social justice warrior snowflake cucks?
Yeah.
Like, do you not see that the X-Men have always been about social justice? Like,
Yeah.
do you not understand that Superman is a Boy Scout? Like,
yeah, there's definitely a disconnect there. Yeah.
Superman started as a socialist figure. When Superman was introduced in the 30s, he was taking it to the bank owners and the realtors and, the corporate lobbyists. Like, that was his thing. Mm-hmm. And Grant Morrison kind of brought that back with his New 52, Superman series in the very beginning there, because Grant Morrison's a great human being.
Indeed.
Wow, boys. We went deep with this one.
Oh, one last thing, sorry. When we were talking about the goblins, and you were saying that's kind of a fantasy trope.
Right.
I don't know if I don't think he's paid a lot of attention to Dungeons and Dragons and whatnot. Like, I do a little bit. But over the last little while, Wizards of the Coast, who is a company that now owns Dungeons and Dragons, have been trying to become a little bit more woke, as the kids no doubt don't say.
Mm-hmm. I think they still say that
anymore because I'm old. I don't know, but they have kind of tried to kind of come away more from that, where you've got dark elves are traditionally evil characters, orcs are evil, and it's like, well, they don't have to be. It's an entire race of people,
right?
And folk
just because they're the other
over that.
Yeah,
that's it. If you look at the dark elves have got black skin, so it's that looks a bit wrong just to say they're bad.
Dodgy.
Orcs generally darker skin. It's it's all the other, as you say. So they're trying to get away from that. So that is getting some pushback from neckbeards.
And are the elves in Lord of the Rings not pretty much just an Aryan race? They're all blonde hair, tall, exactly. Blue eyes.
Yeah, exactly that. There are some fantasy writers out there who take these things and just completely flip them. Do you know what I mean? There was a Dungeons and Dragons setting called Eberron, which every creature was its own thing. There was no evil race of dwarfs or evil race of goblins. There was just people lived in cities and there were good orcs and bad orcs, and it makes more sense. So it can be done without there being a whole thing about it. It was just it was stuck in my head from when we were talking about fantasy tropes. That was all.
Well, there's actually, when I used to play Oblivion nonstop, as if I don't still, 15 years later, I usually played a dark elf because I thought they looked cool. I was like, yeah, man, these seems like badass. I want to be a dark elf. It was never they're assassins and thieves. No, it's just this is a cool looking character.
I always played as a human because I'm not a fucking nerd.
Oh, look at the mer racist over here. I'm Daniel. I play a human. I'm boring as fuck.
I don't like cartoons.
There was something else. I'm more adult than the 40-something-year-old man in the chat. Ooh.
To be fair, that is not hard. That is a very low bar. Like, I am
Yeah.
a child.
I am.
I've got a backwards baseball cap on. Come on.
Yes, as I knock on 30's door, I do not feel like I do. Boy, that went deeper than I expected, to be honest.
So we roll.
I think, I mean, between the stuff we talked about at the beginning and the art versus the artist stuff, well, gee, howdy, gentlemen. I think we might have a podcast right there.
Wowee.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Look at that. That's a whole hour of us saying words at people that
Golden
maybe
content.
some people that, I find that people
And
actually
as far
like
as
to
I
listen
can
to
tell-
podcasts when they offer opinions and something you maybe haven't heard before. You want to hear someone who shares your views. Talk about them.
As far as I can tell, me and Dan didn't fall out either. If we did, I'm sorry, Dan. Like, I didn't mean it.
Oh, no. Big love.
I will apologise to everyone who can hear this for my kind of ranty, bring it all down thing. Like,
Alan's a
I'm
big
an
fat
idiot.
communist.
Wow.
You should all know. You should all know that.
Yeah, and he doesn't know a thing about a thing. Like, he's still
That's-
learning. So
that's your
sometimes he
USP,
opens
though.
his mouth.
That's what you bring.
George St. Pierre.
Unique selling point, but
I think you said GSP. I was like, huh?
no, USP.
You bring that. You bring that hammer and sickle perspective. God help us if anyone is still listening.
Yes, indeed.
We were kind of saving like a couple of fringe things we watched or read or whatever, just in case we needed to fill the time. But I don't really think we do. Like, we're at pretty much an hour here.
I would
Unless
just say go to the website.
Yes. Big Glasgow comicpage.com. We got reviews. We got interviews. Massimo and Daniel and Alan, not me, because I have a terrible short-term memory and I'm just going to mess it all up. But they are holding down the interview racket. Obviously, we got back episodes of the podcast. We've got some news stories. We
News will be back next week.
article or two. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, if things happen, hopefully.
Yeah.
No. Before we go, we can't leave without letting the people know the most important part of news of this week in an upcoming issue of Secret Avengers. It may actually even be out because I'm not reading it. Conan apparently doesn't like pumpkin beer.
I quit
Bombshell, man.
comic books.
I know.
You think you know a guy?
This is all bullshit.
Conan, dude, like, put it in front of me and I'll drink it. Conan, you're letting the side down, man. Like, that's all I'm saying.
I bet Arnold Schwarzenegger
It's
likes
clearly
pumpkin
not
beer.
Scottish. Yeah, god damn it. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a real Chimerian. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he will down that.
He's got the sword and everything. He made a video about it. It was weird.
Yeah, it's a kind of strange guy. Sorry, yeah, you were saying I interrupted.
I have no idea. Oh, yeah. Make sure you check us out on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, BGCP Comic Con. Drop us a line. We'll have a question of the week put up at some point that we'll talk about next week. This week we had to kind of wing it due to the scheduling conflicts. Not Massimo and Bethany's fault. Work is crazy, especially places opening back up. There's some obligations that you didn't have a week ago. Other than that, if you liked our discussion about all kinds of crazy stuff this week, leave a like, maybe subscribe. Maybe we'll talk about more crazy stuff, or maybe we'll just be boring again next week. I don't know. It's a big surprise every week. We're winging it. We're just free flowing. I should stop talking. I don't know what I'm saying at this point.
Oh, leave, if you're listening to this on like a podcatcher, you can leave a review of the podcast audio.
Unless it's a 1-star review, we don't want that. Go away.
Yeah, no,
Do
this
something
was
with
a
your life.
yeah.
If it's a 1-star
up,
review,
woman.
honestly, why did you listen for this long? What's
Yeah.
wrong? What are you
I'm
doing?
not that entertaining.
Why are you here? What are you doing with your life? Play the outro music. Thank you for listening to Disassembled. You can find more news and reviews on BigGlasgowComicPage.com. And don't forget, you can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as BGCP Comic Con. Make sure you also subscribe on your podcast provider of choice for new episodes every week.